Grab your favorite drink, relax, and enjoy this exciting movie. Our movie begins in an illegal fighting ring. We see a fighter named Ford Mask, who easily breaks bones with his strikes. The guy lying there was the sixth person who fell from the beating Ford's punches. It's clear that he's a strong fighter, and no one can stand against him. At this moment, the referee asks the audience if anyone wants to be the seventh challenger against Ford. Amidst all the commotion, a boxer named Dalton enters the ring to challenge Ford. He starts preparing himself and takes off his clothes to begin the fight. But as soon as Ford sees Dalton, he becomes extremely afraid and refuses to fight him. Clearly, this is a big deal because Ford had already announced his withdrawal before the match even began. So, the referee awards the win to Dalton, who takes the match's prize money and leaves. But before he reaches his car, a thug approaches him, saying that he lost his bet on the match because of Dalton. The thug then pulls out a knife and stabs Dalton in the stomach. Strangely, Dalton acts as if nothing happened and stands there normally, while the thug himself is shocked and runs away. Dalton goes to his car with the knife still in his stomach, takes out bandages and tape to treat the wound. At that moment, a woman named Frankie approaches him. She had seen him in the ring and witnessed Ford running away in fear. She is very impressed with him after he won without even fighting. However, she is surprised when she notices the knife sticking out of his stomach and asks if he needs help. Dalton hands her the bandage, letting her treat his wound. Frankie then tells him that she owns a bar in the city of Glasgow and explains that most of her customers are troublemakers. Every day they destroy the place and leave, and the police are unable to stop them. Even the security guards she hired were scared of the customers and fled. She also mentions that she came to the ring after hearing about Ford's strength, intending to hire him as a bouncer for her bar. But after seeing him run away like a coward, she decided that Dalton should be her personal bodyguard. She offers to pay him a lot of money, much more than what he earns in street fights. She also comments that he seems to need the money because his car looks old. After all this talk, Dalton laughs and refuses her offer, telling her that he is comfortable as he is. But Frankie doesn't leave until she writes down her number for him, telling him to think about it and call her later. We learn that Dalton has no place to stay, so he sleeps in his car. A policewoman approaches him and tells him that parking here is prohibited, ordering him to leave. Dalton moves his car around the city, listening to boxing matches on the radio, but he keeps thinking about his past and considers suicide. He parks his car on the train tracks and prepares to jump, but just as the train is about to hit him, he changes his mind and quickly moves out of the way. However, the train hits and destroys his car from behind. After this incident, Dalton decides to go work at Frankie's bar. As soon as he arrives in Galaxy City, he stops to look for the bar since he doesn't even know its name. At that moment, a young girl named Charlie, who works at a bookstore, notices that Dalton is a stranger in the area and comes over to introduce herself. Dalton asks her about the bar in the area. Just then, her father, Stephen, comes out of the store, greets Dalton, and gives him directions to Frankie's bar. Dalton thanks him and heads there. When he arrives at the bar, Frankie sees him and smiles. There, Dalton meets Laura and Billy, who work inside the bar. He feels that the place is calm and enjoyable. While problems usually occur there, he lets his imagination wander. A fight breaks out in the bar, and the situation escalates as drunk customers join in. At that point, Billy intervenes and manages to kick them out. Dalton watches everything and realizes that these kinds of fights are normal. After a few hours, a group of motorcyclists led by a man named Dale enters, causing chaos in the place. They flip tables, and no one dares to look at them. At that moment, Frankie looks at Dalton, waiting to see what he will do. Meanwhile, Dale goes to the pool table and insults a girl there. Billy steps in to confront Dale, trying to save the girl from his grasp. Dale threatens to break Billy's face if he doesn't leave. At that moment, Dalton decides to intervene. He tells Billy to find out what the customers want and leaves him to deal with the troublemakers. He then asks Dill, "Who are you, crazy laugh guy? Do you want to get beaten up?" Dill refuses and grabs a pool stick, breaking it over Dalton's face. Dalton asks if the motorcycles outside belong to them, and one guy, Moya, says yes. Dalton calmly walks out toward the bikes, but Dale follows. Dalton says, "Don't worry, I'm not going to damage your bikes. I just wanted to get you out of the bar quietly." Dale replies, "We'll leave after we kill you." Everyone in the bar steps outside to watch. Dalton warns Dale not to humiliate himself in front of his gang. Dale laughs, thinking Dalton is joking, until Dalton unleashes a lightning-fast beating on the entire gang. Each punch knocks a man down for good. He breaks one guy's arm, dislocates another, and destroys them all effortlessly. Dalton drags them to the hospital, where a nurse named Ellie sees the wrecked gang. She learns Dalton beat them all, follows him outside, and says she doesn't know whether to thank him or call the police. Dalton tells her that the police here don't care about these thugs. At that moment, Ellie notices that Dalton is bleeding from his stomach and urges him to enter the hospital to treat his wound. Dalton agrees and goes inside with her. As soon as Ellie sees the wound, she says it's not serious, but needs stitches. However, Dalton refuses to have it stitched, saying this wound is his own fault and he must feel the penance for it. Ellie finds him crazy but applies a bandage and gives him antibiotics. Dalton thanks her and leaves the hospital. Meanwhile, we see some of Dale's gang members watching Dalton as he exits. When he returns to the bar, Frankie thanks him for what he did and gives him a week's salary in advance. She also tells him that she has a boat on the shore that belonged to her grandfather, where he can temporarily live. She warns him to be careful because there's a dangerous crocodile living nearby. Dalton goes to the boat, fixes things up, and then goes to sleep. He dreams that he is in a boxing match for the world championship, but suddenly he wakes up startled. A girl wakes him up, thanks him for helping, and brings him breakfast. She says she was going to quit because of the gang, but changed her mind after what he did. Dalton visits Charlie's shop. Everyone now knows him. He asks to use her computer, and she gives him the password. Meanwhile, some thieves try to rob a nearby shop. Charlie grabs a baseball bat. Dalton steps out, and the robbers flee when they see him. Dalton is surprised by Charlie's bravery and asks about her father. She says he earns little from selling books, and her mother died last year. Back at the bar, even the janitors know Dalton. Frankie says the whole town is gossiping about how he beat up Dale's gang alone. Dale's men meet their boss, Brandt, whose furious Dale is hospitalized with a concussion. Brandt asks how one guy broke all their bones. Moya says Dalton was calm but hit like a machine. Brant throws them off his yacht in disgust. Back at the bar, there's a new fight between two drunk guys. Dalton tells Billy to watch out for the one in red because he's hiding a knife. He instructs Billy that the moment the guy pulls out the knife, he should step back and punch him in the face quickly. Billy follows Dalton's instructions and handles the situation well. Just before the guy attacks, Dalton steps in, breaks his arm, and takes the knife away, telling him, "No weapons here, buddy." From that moment, Billy is able to handle the rowdy customers thanks to Dalton's guidance. That night, Dalton goes to train a bit and then meets someone named Reef, who used to help Billy at the bar. Dalton notices signs on Reef's hands and realizes he was a former boxer. Dalton asks him to help out at the bar, and Reef agrees. Together, Reef and Billy easily remove troublemakers, and days go by without issues at the bar, thanks to Dalton's leadership. The next day, Dalton sees Dilo's gang loitering near the bar. As soon as they see him, they walk away. Looks like they're planning something. That night, Dalton has another dream about being in a boxing match and wakes up startled, as usual. He goes for breakfast at a nearby diner and runs into Ellie by chance. She tells him she should have warned him about the people in this town. They grew up here and do whatever they want. The police rarely show up. The two sit and eat together and fall for each other. That night, after finishing work, Dalton goes for a walk. Suddenly, a car speeds toward him, trying to run him over. Dalton dodges at the last second. The car circles back to hit him again, so he jumps into the water just as the car crashes through a wooden bridge. Dilo and a woman get out of the car, thinking they've killed him, not realizing their actions were childish. When Dalton returns to the boat, he finds Dilo there, holding a shotgun and threatening him. Dilo says he knew Dalton survived, and now he'll finish him off. But Dalton calmly asks him one question: "Why are you doing this to me?" Then he uses Dilo's stupidity against him, flips the table, takes him down, and throws the shotgun into the water. Dilo says, "Fine, I'll get up and beat you to death." But before he can finish his rant, an alligator suddenly appears and attacks him. Dalton tries to save him, but the gator already devours him. The next day, the police arrive searching for Dilo's body, but they find no trace. A neighbor tells them that Dilo was part of a big drug gang. When Dalton hears this, he goes to Charlie and asks her to find out where the boat docks are in the city. He wants to know where the drug deals happen. As he leaves, one of Brant's men stops him and tells him to get in the car because the boss wants to see him. Dalton refuses. The guy shows him a gun, trying to scare him. But Dalton walks up to him and says, "That gun doesn't scare me." He grabs him, and the man gets angry and pulls out his gun. Dalton, with incredible speed, breaks his fingers. Someone else was approaching Dalton, but after what he saw, he backs off. Dalton tells him to let their boss know that if he wants him, he should come to the bar where he works. They go to meet Frankie, and he asks her why Deal and his men kept coming to trash her bar. She tells him she doesn't know the reason, but they're just a gang looking for trouble. At that time, the guy whose fingers Dalton broke goes and tells Brant what happened. Brant gets furious because he wants to take over the bar to build a big resort. But the problem is that Frankie is holding on to the bar and won't give it up. At that moment, his father, Gerald, calls him and asks him what he did about the bar. Brant gets frustrated and throws the phone into the lake because his father had ordered him to get rid of the bar as soon as possible. But clearly, he's not up to the task. That's why when his father realizes his son is useless, he contacts a hitman named Knox and asks him to handle the job. He even promises to give him clothes to wear. Meanwhile, Ellie arrives by boat, which she borrowed from a friend. After convincing Dalton, they go together to a very remote place with no one around. They sit and drink together, and of course, temptation is in the air. Ellie asks him about the guy eaten by the alligator. Dalton tells her that Deal was trying to kill him and that he works for a gang leader named Brant. Surprisingly, Ellie knows Brant well and tells him that Brant's father built almost half of Glass Key City. When things get too intimate, Dalton says they should leave. Ellie is confused and asks him what's wrong. Dalton tells her she's a really good person and deserves someone better than him. But Ellie refuses to let him leave and confesses she likes him. Meanwhile, Knox arrives in Glass Key, storms into Brant's men, destroys their bikes, starts eating their food while they all stand shocked, unsure who this lunatic is. When one tries to talk back, Knox beats all of them up. A few hours later, Brant arrives and meets Knox after his men have been beaten. He asks him who he is. Knox tells him his father sent him, because clearly Brant can't control the city. And someone wiped the floor with his men. So his father sent Knox to fix the situation. Brant is scared of him, but tries to act in control. Knox ignores him and asks who's causing the trouble. Brant says they can't just go kill someone in public. Knox laughs and says not to worry. As long as he's on the mission, everything's handled. Brant says he'll try one more time his way, and if that fails, Knox can step in. Meanwhile, Dalton and Ellie are returning to the boat. As Ellie leaves, two cops show up and ask Dalton to come with them. The head of the district wants to talk. Ellie notices this before they take him away. Dalton arrives and meets the police chief, Dick, who tells him he has one piece of advice: leave town and never show his face again. Dalton laughs and says he doesn't need advice from anyone. Dick gets angry and says he could use his own methods and throw him in jail easily. Dalton gets provoked, and Dick orders the cops to drag Dalton out of the car and teach him a lesson. After they beat him, Dick points a gun at him, about to kill him. But Ellie suddenly appears. Strangely, Dick backs off and lowers the gun. Without warning, Ellie slaps him hard and takes Dalton away. The surprise is that Dick is actually Ellie's father. She tells Dalton she never loved him so much that she even changed her name because of him. She tells Dalton she never loved him so much that she even changed her name because of him. She reveals that Brant's father, Gerald, is a major crime boss, and unfortunately, her father works for him. She also tells him that Gerald has many investments in the city and is involved in drug trafficking. It looks like Brant was the one who ordered Dick to kill Dalton. She advises Dalton to pack his things and leave the city immediately. Dalton becomes confused and unsure what to do. Meanwhile, two of Brant's men go toward Charlie's shop with a jerry can of gasoline. It looks like they're planning something bad. Charlie grabs a bat to defend her shop. That night, Brant himself goes to the bar to meet Dalton. He tells him, "Since you don't respond to threats or even death, tell me, what's a stranger like you doing here?" Dalton looks at him in disgust and doesn't reply. Brant shows him an old video of Dalton in a boxing match against a friend. In that match, Dalton's friend had already surrendered, but Dalton kept hitting him until he killed him. Since then, Dalton has been depressed and hopeless. Brant keeps exploiting that and reminds him he killed his own friend. When Dalton doesn't react, Brant leaves and orders Knox to go finish Dalton off. Knox enters the bar with a golf club and starts wrecking the place, grabs a girl to dance with, and when Billy intervenes, Knox hits him with the club. 3 guys try to hold Knox, and Riff tries to hit him, but Knox defeats them all. Even while being held, the bar turns into a war zone. Knox keeps calling for Dalton, who finally gets up to end the fight. Enter Text. Though Dalton speaks calmly, Knox knows better and headbutts him. They get into a fierce fight. Dalton is fast, but Knox hits him with a kick and throws him into the bar. Dalton gets up and punches with all his strength until Brant's men restrain him. Knox beats him badly. The townspeople gather and try to hold Knox back to protect Dalton, who breaks free and returns to the fight. But Knox is too strong and throws him out of the bar. Dalton decides to quietly walk away. Frankie says, "Are you really that scared of them?" He says yes, he's really scared, and leaves. When he reaches the station, he sees Charlie's shop burned down, with fire trucks around. He asks about Charlie and her dad, and learns they're in the hospital. Dalton starts thinking, stay and get revenge on Brant's gang or leave. He decides to stay and get revenge. He goes to Brant's locker and finds Vince, the one who set fire to Charlie's shop. Dalton tells him he was leaving, but after what they did to that little girl, he decided to stay. He approaches Vince, who pulls out a knife to kill him. Dalton dodges and hits him in the neck, telling him he won't be able to breathe again. Vince falls into the pool, about to die. Dalton says he's the second person to call him scared. And yes, he is scared of what happens when someone gets really mad. As he leaves, he finds Moya standing scared. Dalton asks where Brant is. Moya says he doesn't know, but he knows Brant is smuggling drugs at 5 a.m. on the beach. After this useful info, Dalton goes to get some sleep. He dreams about the boxing match where he killed his friend, a recurring nightmare he can't shake. He wakes up at 5 and heads to the beach. There, he sees a cop sending money to drug dealers by boat. Dalton sneaks up and hits him on the head, takes the money bag, and leaves. The next day, Dalton starts preparing explosives. Dick arrives and says he's not here to arrest him. He explains that Brant kidnapped his daughter Ellie because Dalton stole his money. He says Brant will kill her tomorrow if the money isn't returned, and that's why he's asking for Dalton's help. Dalton agrees to help. He says he'll get the money from its hiding place and come meet him and Brant in a bit. Dalton then steals Ellie's friend's boat to go meet them. When he arrives, Brant asks where the money is. Dalton plays dumb and says he doesn't even believe Ellie was kidnapped. He says, "Is this really the face of a man whose daughter was just taken?" Dick says, "You actually believed Brant kidnapped my daughter? We're partners, you idiot." Brant then says, "Honestly, I did kidnap her. I needed to make sure you wouldn't betray me." Dick gets angry and pulls a gun. Dalton says, "All right, I'll leave you two to fight it out." He walks off, but Brant stops him and says, "You've caused me a lot of problems in this town." As they argue, Knox arrives in his boat. Brant, who hates him, tells his men not to let that lunatic touch his sister. Dalton pulls a key from his pocket and triggers the explosives he planted on the boat, causing a massive explosion that destroys the whole boat. Dalton then goes looking for Ellie, fighting Brant's men, and finally finds her. They both surface on the water, Brant's men attack, and a fight breaks out. Brant escapes with Ellie on another boat, and that lunatic is circling around on the boat, thinking he's going to get away. But Dalton manages to reach his boat, and Knox, when he sees him, starts attacking him. But Dalton takes advantage of his stupidity and knocks him into the water. But Knox manages to grab the rope of the boat, and Dalton drags him behind it inside the water. Meanwhile, Brant sees him and immediately turns his boat toward him, and the two crash into each other violently. At that moment, Dalton is thrown and falls into Brant's boat. Ellie tries to hit Brant, but when he turns on her, Dalton grabs him and breaks his bones. And all of this happens while the boat is speeding toward the shore. Dalton and Ellie jump quickly before the boat crashes into the beach, and Brant is thrown onto the shore. On the other side, Knox is still alive and hijacks a car on the road and drives off. Meanwhile, Dalton goes to Brant and beats him up fiercely. Brant still can't believe that his whole project and life were ruined because of Dalton. At that moment, Knox storms into the place in the car and starts his final battle with Dalton. At first, Knox is overpowering Dalton, beating him with full force. But Dalton doesn't give up. He starts landing very strong punches, and the fight continues. Knox is thrown to the ground, and the fight between them is extremely brutal because they are at the same level. Dalton manages to resist and begins striking Knox hard, bringing him down to the ground. Then he grabs him by the neck to finish the fight, and at that moment, Knox tries to free himself and actually gets up, grabs a small spear, and manages to stab Dalton in the side. Dalton is badly hurt and almost passes out. Then Brant wakes up and tells Knox to kill him and finish the mission. But suddenly, Knox snaps his neck. He was fed up with both him and his father. Then he goes toward Dalton to finish him off with the second spear, but Dalton gathers all his strength, pulls the spear out of his belly, and stabs Knox in the leg with it. Then he pulls out both spears and starts stabbing him all over his body until Knox's whole body is full of holes and he dies. Then Ellie arrives and sees what happened, and Dick shows up at the scene and tells Dalton he has to leave town immediately. He'll take care of the mess he made. Meanwhile, Frankie is at the bar, trying to fix it up again with Billy. Dalton is waiting for the bus to leave, but Charlie shows up and tries to convince him to stay. Dalton tells her it's better if he leaves. Then Stephen finds a bag inside the place, and when he opens it, he finds the bag of money that Dalton took from the cop, which he decided to leave for them to renovate the bar after the gang destroyed it. And that's it, my friend. This is where the movie ends.